The abandoned. The morning shift alarm echoed through Halen HFY's empty corridors like a death rattle. Mason Jex rolled off his makeshift bed, a cargo crate cushioned with old shuttle padding, and stretched his aching back. 7 years on this forgotten outpost had taught him that some days were just about surviving until the next one. Halen 6 wasn't much to look at. Perched on the edge of a lifeless asteroid belt, it served as a dumping ground for the galaxy's unwanted cargo. The air recyclers wheezed constantly, filling the station with the metallic taste of failing filters. Most star charts didn't even bother marking their location. Mason pulled on his work coveralls and grabbed his tool kit. As the station's only mechanic, he kept the life support systems running, the lights flickering, and the artificial gravity from cutting out completely. It wasn't glamorous work, but it kept him fed and housed. He was halfway through replacing a corroded plasma valve when he heard it, a sound that didn't belong in his world of mechanical hisses and electrical hums. It was organic, pained, barely audible over the background noise of the station. Following the sound led him to the cargo bay, where a new shipment had arrived overnight. The manifest read, "Rejected bio-livestock, condemned for disposal." Mason had seen these shipments before. Genetic experiments gone wrong, creatures too deformed or diseased to sell, all waiting for the next garbage scow to incinerate them. In the darkest corner of the bay, he found the source of the sound. The creature was unlike anything he'd seen before. It resembled a horse, but wrong somehow, too elegant, too ethereal. Its hide was ash-gray, matted with grime and sweat. Long, graceful limbs were folded beneath a trembling body, and its neck curved in an impossible arch that spoke of alien engineering. What struck Mason most were its eyes, silver glass orbs that held intelligence and pain in equal measure. A red tag hung from its neck like a death sentence, unfit, disposal authorized. The creature's right foreleg was grotesquely swollen, the hoof split nearly in half. Blood and infection had turned the wound into a festering mess that reeked of decay. Every shallow breath the creature took was a struggle against agony. Mason knelt beside it, his weathered hands hovering over the trembling form. He'd spent years fixing broken machines, but this was different. This was something alive, something that was fighting to stay that way despite everything working against it. "Easy there," he whispered, his voice rough from years of talking only to himself. "I've got you." The creature's silver eyes fixed on his face, and Mason saw something there that made his decision for him. Not resignation, not surrender, hope. Desperate, dying hope that maybe, just maybe, someone would care enough to try. Without another thought, Mason stripped off his jacket and wrapped it around the shivering form. The creature was heavier than he expected, all muscle and bone despite its weakened state. He lifted it carefully, ignoring the protests from his back, and carried it toward his quarters. The station's automated systems registered the movement but didn't care. Nothing on Halen 6 ever cared about anything. As Mason settled the creature onto his bed, using every spare blanket and cloth he owned to make it comfortable, he couldn't shake the feeling that this moment would change everything. He looked into those silver eyes one more time and saw something that had been missing from his life for 7 long years. Purpose. The healing. Mason had never performed surgery on anything more complex than a circuit board, but desperation made him careful. He sterilized every tool he owned, converted his emergency heater to warm his quarters, and laid out supplies scavenged from the station's medical bay. The creature, he'd started thinking of it as dust fire because of its ash-gray hide, lay motionless as Mason worked. The infected abscess was worse than he'd initially thought. The hoof wasn't just split, it looked like someone had taken a sledgehammer to it and left it to rot. "I don't know what I'm doing," Mason admitted to his patient as he cleaned the wound. "But I'm not giving up on you." Hour after hour, he drained infection, applied synthetic healing foam, and wrapped the leg in bandages made from repurposed equipment straps. He'd salvaged pain suppressants from expired medical kits, hoping the doses were still effective despite their age. For 3 days, Dustfire barely moved. His breathing came in shallow gasps, and his silver eyes remained closed. Mason slept on the floor beside him, checking his pulse and temperature every few hours. On the second night, he was sure he'd lost his patient. But on the third evening, those glass-silver eyes opened and fixed directly on Mason's face. There was no fear in that gaze, no wild panic of a cornered animal. Instead, Dustfire studied him with an intelligence that sent chills down Mason's spine. "You're still in there, aren't you?" Mason whispered, placing a gentle hand on the creature's forehead. "You want to live." Dustfire let out a soft breath that might have been agreement, and his eyes drifted closed again. But this time, Mason could see the difference. This wasn't the unconsciousness of dying, this was rest. Peaceful, healing rest. Over the following week, the fever broke. The swelling in Dustfire's leg receded, though the damaged hoof would bear scars forever. Mason fashioned a protective pad from pulse gel insulation, cushioning each step until the tissue could strengthen. The first time Dustfire stood on his own, Mason nearly cried. The creature swayed, testing his weight, then took a tentative step. Then another. And then he ran. It wasn't far, just the length of Mason's converted quarters, but watching Dustfire move was like witnessing magic. Despite the healing injury, despite the makeshift padding, there was something otherworldly in his gait. His stride was too smooth, too fluid, as if he was skating across the station's metal floors rather than walking on them. When Dustfire hit his rhythm, he didn't just run, he glided. His hooves struck the deck plating with sharp, resonant clinks that sounded almost musical. Muscles rippled beneath his ash-gray hide like controlled lightning. Mason dropped his plasma torch and stared. "They made you to run, didn't they?" Dustfire's ears perked up at the sound of his voice, and he flicked his tail as if in response. Then he ran again, this time with more confidence, more grace. Each step was a declaration that he was alive, that he was meant for something greater than the condemned cargo bay where Mason had found him. That night, as Mason watched his rescued companion rest peacefully in the corner of his quarters, he made a decision. Dustfire wasn't just surviving anymore, he was recovering. And if Mason's suspicions were correct, what lay beneath that ash-gray hide was something the galaxy hadn't seen in a very long time. Something extraordinary. The discovery. Within a month, Mason had transformed the northern section of Halen 6 into something resembling a training facility. He reprogrammed the magnetic rail system that once moved cargo pods, turning it into a circuit of lights and markers. Old shuttle repair equipment became obstacles and challenges. The abandoned wind tunnel now provided resistance training. Every evening after his maintenance duties, Mason would stand at the edge of his makeshift track with a salvaged chronometer, timing Dustfire's runs. What he saw defied everything he thought he knew about biology and physics. Dustfire moved like liquid mercury given form. His split hoof had healed into something stronger than before, the scar tissue creating a natural grip that sent sparks across the metal decking. When he reached full speed, he seemed to blur, his ash-gray form becoming a streak of motion that made Mason's eyes water to follow. "Impossible," Mason muttered, checking his chronometer for the third time. Dustfire had just completed the circuit in a time that would shatter records in the professional racing leagues, if those records applied to creatures that were supposed to be condemned rejects. It was meant to be a private moment, recorded only for Mason's own analysis of Dustfire's gait and movement. He'd rigged an old maintenance drone to follow the runs, uploading the footage to Halen HFY standard cloud storage. The system was ancient, rarely accessed, and definitely not connected to any major networks. But technology has a way of failing at the worst possible moments. For exactly 5 seconds, a routing error caused the feed to broadcast live across the merchant network, a collection of traders, collectors, and tournament organizers who dealt in exotic creatures and rare mounts. 5 seconds of Dustfire at full speed, muscles rippling under his scarred hide, moving faster than anything in the registered breeding databases. 5 seconds that changed everything. Mason was repairing a faulty atmospheric processor when his comm unit crackled to life, the first incoming transmission Halen 6 had received in months. "This is Captain Vex of the merchant vessel Prophet's Edge," a gravelly voice announced. We need to speak with whoever's operating the facility on Halen 6. Immediately. Mason's blood ran cold. Discovery meant questions. Questions meant officials. Officials meant losing Dustfire. This is Mason Jex, station mechanic. What's this about? That creature in your broadcast, Jex. Where did you get it? I don't know what you're talking about. A pause. Then, we recorded everything. That's no ordinary mount you've got there. The genetic markers, the movement patterns, that's Velascarine bloodline. The words hit Mason like a physical blow. Velascarine genetics had been banned throughout the galaxy after the Hegemony Wars. The entire bloodline was supposed to have been destroyed by treaty, purged from existence to prevent anyone from creating super soldiers or war mounts again. That's impossible, Mason said weakly. Is it? Because what we saw looked exactly like the old archive footage of Velascarine war mounts. Pre-purged specimens that could outrun spacecraft and fight entire battalions. The kind of creatures that ended wars just by existing. Mason looked through the viewport at Dustfire, who was grazing peacefully on the nutrient paste Mason had been feeding him. His ash-gray hide caught the station's artificial light, and his silver eyes held that same intelligent calm they'd shown since his recovery. What do you want? Mason asked. We want to see if we're right. There's a racing tournament on Nexus Prime in 2 months. Big money, bigger prestige. If that creature is what we think it is, it could make us all very wealthy. And if I refuse? Another pause. Then we might have to report a potential treaty violation to the Galactic Authority. They take Velascarine genetics very seriously, Jex. Even possessing them is a capital offense. Mason's hand tightened on the comm unit. He looked at Dustfire again, remembering the dying creature he'd found in that cargo bay, the slow process of healing, the joy in those silver eyes when he'd taken his first steps. I'll need time to think about it. You have 24 hours. Then we're coming to Halen 6 either way. The comm unit went silent, leaving Mason alone with his thoughts and a creature that might be the last living remnant of a bloodline the galaxy had tried to forget. Outside the viewport, Dustfire lifted his head and looked directly at Mason, as if he understood that their quiet life together was about to end. The challenge. Captain Vex arrived with 3 ships and enough firepower to level Halen 6 twice over. Mason watched through the observation deck as the merchant vessels docked, their hulls scarred from 100 different conflicts. These weren't casual traders, they were people who dealt in the kind of cargo that governments preferred not to think about. Impressive setup you've got here, Vex said as he toured Mason's makeshift training facility. He was a lean man with cybernetic implants replacing half his face, his remaining eye fixed on Dustfire with predatory intensity. For a condemned reject, he moves remarkably well. He's not for sale, Mason replied firmly. Vex laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Everything's for sale, Jex. The question is price. But I'm not here to buy, I'm here to propose a partnership. He activated a holographic display showing the racing circuits of Nexus Prime. The Galactic Grand Prix. 50 of the fastest mounts in known space competing for the biggest purse in racing history. Your creature wins, we split the prize money. He loses. Vex shrugged. Well, at least we'll know for certain what he is. And if I refuse? Then I report a potential treaty violation to the authorities. They'll confiscate your creature for genetic analysis, and you'll spend the rest of your life in a penal colony. Vex's smile was cold. But I'm feeling generous. Win or lose, you keep your pet. I just want to know if the legends are true. Mason looked at Dustfire, who was watching the conversation with those intelligent silver eyes. The creature seemed to understand that decisions were being made about his future. What if he gets hurt? Racing's dangerous. That's what makes it profitable. Vex began pacing around Dustfire, studying him from every angle. But if he really is Velascarine stock, injury will be the least of your worries. The other racers won't just be trying to win, they'll be trying to eliminate him permanently. The next 2 months passed in a blur of preparation. Vex Mechanics upgraded Mason's training facility with professional-grade equipment. Dustfire's times improved daily, but more importantly, he seemed to enjoy the challenge. His silver eyes gleamed with something approaching excitement when he ran, as if he was finally being allowed to express his true nature. Mason spent sleepless nights researching Velascarine bloodlines in the ship's databases. What he found chilled him. These creatures hadn't just been fast, they'd been engineered as living weapons. Their hooves could shatter armor, their speed could outpace military vehicles, and their intelligence rivaled that of most sentient species. They'd been created to end the hegemony wars by making conventional military forces obsolete. A single Velascarine warmount could devastate entire battalions, moving too fast to target and hitting too hard to stop. The peace treaty that ended the wars had required their complete destruction for good reason. And Mason had rescued the last one from a garbage scow. Nexus Prime was everything Halen 6 wasn't, gleaming, crowded, alive with the energy of 1,000 different species gathered to witness the greatest racing spectacle in the galaxy. The Grand Prix track was a masterpiece of engineering, a three-dimensional course that wound through asteroid fields, plasma streams, and gravity wells. In the staging area, Mason felt completely out of place among the professional racing teams with their million-credit mounts and armies of technicians. Dustfire stood calmly beside him, seemingly unbothered by the chaos and noise. "First time at the big show?" asked a voice behind him. Mason turned to see a young woman in racing leathers, her arms covered in the ritual scarification that marked her as Kasari nobility. Her mount was a magnificent creature that looked like it had been carved from living crystal. "Yeah," Mason admitted. "You?" She laughed. "I'm Princess Zara of the Kasari Consortium. I've been racing since I could walk. And you're the mystery entry everyone's talking about, the condemned reject that somehow qualified with impossible times." She looked at Dustfire with professional assessment. "He's beautiful, in a broken sort of way. But beautiful doesn't win races. Speed does. Power does. Breeding does." Her expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry for what's about to happen to both of you." The starting horn echoed across Nexus Prime, and 50 of the fastest creatures in the galaxy surged forward into the void. Mason held his breath as Dustfire found his rhythm, that impossible fluid grace carrying him past mount after mount until he was running with the leaders. But Mason could see the other racers converging on them, and he realized that Princess Zara had been trying to warn him. This wasn't just a race. It was a hunt. The legend. The Galactic Grand Prix became a battlefield disguised as a race. From the moment Dustfire pulled ahead of the pack, the other riders abandoned any pretense of fair competition. This was about eliminating a threat to the established order, about making sure the Velascarine bloodline died quietly in the vacuum of space. Mason watched in horror as crystalline mounts flanked Dustfire on both sides, their riders wielding energy whips that could slice through hull plating. Behind them, a pack of mechanical warhounds closed in, their cyber-enhanced legs pounding against the track's magnetic rails. "Come on," Mason whispered, his hands clenched around the control rail. "Show them what you really are." As if hearing his words across the void, Dustfire's silver eyes blazed with ancient fire. His scarred hoof struck the track, sending a shower of sparks that temporarily blinded his nearest pursuer. Then he did something that made the crowd gasp in collective shock. He left the track entirely. Dustfire leaped from the designated racing circuit onto the raw asteroid surface, his hooves finding purchase on stone and metal debris. The other mounts, bred for speed on prepared surfaces, couldn't follow. They watched helplessly as the ash-gray creature ran across impossible terrain, defying gravity and physics with every stride. "That's impossible," Captain Vex breathed, his cybernetic eye whirring as it tried to track Dustfire's movement. "The course sensors can't even lock onto him." But Princess Zara was smiling. "No," she said softly. "That's Velascarine." Dustfire wasn't just running anymore, he was flying. His powerful legs propelled him from asteroid to asteroid, his body moving with the fluid grace of something born in the void itself. The crowd fell silent as they witnessed something that hadn't been seen in over a century, a creature that could run between the stars. The other racers tried to follow, but one by one they fell behind or crashed into the debris field. This wasn't a race they could win through training or technology. This was evolution in action, a creature expressing the genetic destiny that had been locked away in his cells since birth. When Dustfire crossed the finish line, not on the track, but through the asteroid field itself, he was 17 minutes ahead of the closest competitor. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Mason could see the fear in their eyes. They were witnessing the return of something that had been deliberately erased from history. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice crackled with static, "we have a new Galactic Grand Prix champion. Dustfire, ridden by. He paused, clearly struggling with the unprecedented nature of the victory. By his human companion, Mason Jex. In the winner's circle, as Mason placed the golden laurel around Dustfire's neck, the creature looked at him with those silver eyes, and Mason saw something that made his chest tight with emotion. Not just intelligence, not just gratitude, recognition. Dustfire understood exactly what they had accomplished together. "We did it," Mason whispered, his voice thick with tears. He hadn't realized he was crying. "We actually did it." But their victory was short-lived. As they prepared to leave Nexus Prime, Mason noticed the unmarked ships gathering in the station's outer reaches. The Galactic Authority had arrived, and they weren't here to congratulate the winners. "You need to go." Princess Zara appeared at his shoulder, her racing leathers replaced by the formal robes of Kasari nobility. "My family has influence, but not enough to protect you from what's coming. They can't allow a Velascarian to live, not after what the crowd saw today." "Where can we go?" Mason asked desperately. "They'll track us anywhere in civilized space." "Then don't go to civilized space." She pressed a data chip into his hand. "Coordinates to the fringe worlds. Kasari trading posts where questions aren't asked and genetic scans aren't performed. Take your prize money and disappear." Mason looked at the chip, then at Dustfire, who was watching the approaching Authority ships with those impossibly intelligent eyes. The creature seemed to understand that their brief moment of triumph was ending. "Why are you helping us?" Princess Zara smiled sadly. "Because I watched him run today. And I know that some things are too beautiful to let die quietly." 6 months later, on a frontier world where 3 suns painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Mason Jex sat on the porch of a small ranch and watched Dustfire run through fields of crystal grass. The creature moved with the same impossible grace, but now there was joy in his movement, freedom in every stride. The Galactic Authority still searched for them, but the fringe worlds were vast and full of people who had their own reasons for avoiding official attention. Mason had used his prize money to buy land, to build a place where Dustfire could run without fear, where the last Velascarian could live as he was meant to. Sometimes, in the evening light, Mason would watch his companion race across the plains and remember the dying creature he'd found on Halen 6. The galaxy had tried to forget the Velascarian bloodline, had tried to erase them from history and memory alike. But humanity had a habit of preserving beautiful things, even when the rest of the galaxy wanted them gone. And sometimes, just sometimes, that made all the difference. As the sun set and Dustfire returned to the ranch, his silver eyes gleaming with contentment, Mason knew he'd made the right choice. They were legends now, remembered in racing circles and feared by those who preferred their genetic purges to be permanent. But more than that, they were free. And in a galaxy that often forgot the value of freedom, that was perhaps the most precious victory of all. The end.